It's good to be here. I haven't been here probably in 15 years since my friend Bill Hoff was here. And I think we came out to work on the lawn or something. At Hoff, he's a great salesperson. You get a friend to come. But Bill's doing great, loves you people, misses you people. And let me read, up there, yes. Let me read Mark's gospel for you. Mark is my favorite gospel. I've worked with teenagers really all of my career in ministry. Mark's gospel I love because it's quick and fast and moves right along. Teenagers love it. So let me read to you from the beginning of Mark's gospel, chapter 1, verse 9. In those days, Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. And just as he was coming out of the water, he saw the heavens torn apart and the Spirit descending like a dove on him, and a voice from heaven saying, "You are my Son, the beloved. With you I am well pleased." Word from the Lord. I have a hero who is a Presbyterian minister. Actually, he just died about 6 months ago, but he's probably written 30 books, and I love them. I've read them. He was I don't want to go into his history, but he's an amazing man. But here's what I appreciate. He said, the primary word to describe God's activity to all people in the world is blessing. Now, I didn't grow up with that. As I told the kids, I didn't grow up in my family with the word blessing. It was totally new to me. But that's what's happening here in Mark 1, 9 through 11. Jesus is getting blessed. The scene is there's John the Baptist up there. He's in water, maybe knee deep in the Jordan, the muddy Jordan River, and he's surrounded by people. And very quietly in the back, Jesus creeps into the water. No big flash, no big deal, and joins John in the Jordan. I always used to wonder, why did Jesus, scholars say he was 30 when this happened, why did Jesus wait so long? And as I read more, I realized that Jesus waited that long because you had to be 30 if you were a Jewish man to be heard by everybody. And he was ready and wanted to be heard. So one day, he just folds up his little woodworking apron, goes and says, "Mama, I'm headed out of here." Of course, she knew what was coming, even more than he did. Then he goes and talks to his brothers that he had his business with and said, "Hey, it's yours." No, you can't leave. Jesus, you're the one who brings people in here. Yeah. Nope, I've got something else to do. And he quietly goes into the Jordan River. And there are some scholars who believe that that was his first miracle, the miracle of humility, of Jesus who didn't need to be baptized, moving into the water with all of us and saying, "I am with you. We're in this together." The miracle of humility. Then something important happened. We have in this scene, and I just read it, God the Son moves into the water. God the Father speaks to Jesus, and God the Holy Spirit falls on Jesus. Mark is saying, listen up. Something really, really important is happening here. When you have those three together, it's a sign, pay attention. Only happens one other time in Mark's gospel. That the three of them are together. And let me read again what my friend Eugene Peterson, how he translates. Have any of y'all read the Message translation? Eugene Peterson, the man I was talking about earlier, did the Message translation, and here's how translates this. This is my beloved Son, chosen and marked by my love, delight of my life. Now here's what I think this passage says to us. Before Jesus had done any miracles, before he'd done any teaching, before he'd done anything important, God says to him, you are my beloved. You are blessed by me. No miracles. He hadn't called any of the disciples. Nothing had happened yet. Before all that, Jesus is blessed by God. Now, if Jesus is blessed by God before he starts his ministry, how much more do you think you and I need to be blessed by God before we walk into every day of our lives? After Jesus is blessed by God and called the beloved, you know what happens next? He gets, the word is he gets shoved into the wilderness by God the Spirit. And I think, we know he was tempted there from Matthew's gospel, but I think partly what is happening is Jesus is pondering, what does it mean to be blessed? See, we don't know what it means to be blessed. We know, we good Americans know what it means to work harder and perform and to make stuff happen, but we don't know what it means to be blessed. So Jesus is out there working for 40 days with what it means to be blessed. Then he comes back and begins his ministry. Now, blessing in the Old Testament had to do with several things. It had to do with touch. You noticed I touched all the kids, or I tried to touch all the kids. It had to do with words spoken over somebody who was being blessed. And then it was the person doing the blessing, in this case God, uses all their energy to make sure that that blessing happens. That's what blessing is about. Sometimes it's touch. Say like right after this in, I think it's verse 40 of Mark's gospel, Jesus touches a leper. Nobody else would. Blessing has to do with touch. Blessing has to do with saying something verbal over something. Blessing has to do with an action that you use all your energy to make something happen for that person. If you're a parent, that's exactly what you want for your kids. All those things is what you want. Now, when I was growing up, I told the kids, we didn't talk about blessing. The only blessing you got in my family is if you performed far and above what the expectation was. And what was expected in my family was a lot of performing well. You do this, you do that. Okay, good. Okay, maybe okay, good. But there's a cost to that. So I grew up not believing the idea of blessing. Just didn't, because we didn't do it. Let me tell you a story about my son, my youngest. By the time my youngest son was there, was in our house, I had a job in Young Life where I was traveling all over the South. I was busy, I was gone a lot. But when I'd be home, we'd lie in bed together and I'd, talk to him about the day and then try and get him to pray. I mean, I'm a Christian dad. I want to get him to pray. I want to teach him to pray. So I'd start off praying for his dog, then his bicycle, then his friends down the street. And then I'd say, John, you want to pray with me? Silence. Okay, I'll try tomorrow. Same thing. Silence. A week. Silence. So I keep it up. I'm not going to let go. So it's about been a week and a half, and I say, I pray for his dog, I pray for his bike, I pray for his friends. John, you want to pray? God, thank you for the toilet. Okay. Lord, thank you for the poop in the toilet. I'm not a psychologist. My wife is a therapist. But I'm sharp enough to know this is like saying, Dad, back away. I'm not up for your religious prayer, blah, blah, blah. So, okay. Next week, I was in a meeting in Colorado Springs, and I was talking to my roommate, who is a Lutheran pastor, great guy, and I was just saying, my son, prayer, I'm trying to teach him to pray. It's not working. I feel like I'm such a loss at what to do. He said, well, have you ever blessed him? And that was the time when aside from when the minister at the end of church says, bless y'all, and that didn't take with me. But anyway, I said, no, what do you mean, bless my son? He said, you just put your hands on his chest or your hands on his forehead, and I'll give you a couple of blessings, and you say them over him. So I thought, okay, that's low risk, that might work. I go back, and John, how about instead of praying, I'll ask God to bless you? Silence. How about could I just put my hand on your chest and pray for you? Sure, Dad, that's okay. So I start in and I pray for him for a while. Let me tell you, you can't touch your child and want God to bless your child. It's not just a one sentence something. You really start talking about, Lord, what you want for that child. And, it meant something to me. And we kept it up. And we kept it up. And we kept it up. I remember he was 13, and we had an old beat up car, and we're going to school. And I say, John, you were the greatest kid in the world. I'm so glad that you're my son. And then he says, yep, Dad, that's great, except I'm not going to ride in this old beat-up car up to school again. You can just let me off here. And I just thought, oh, Lord. But we kept on. And I was up in Young Life Has a Camp in North Carolina, and I was up there leading a seminar Friday night. I gave him a call. How's your day? Fine. He's a good athlete. How's the soccer match? I did really well. Okay. Then we kind of spent 15 minutes on the phone, and I said, would it be okay if I prayed God's blessing over you? He said, sure, Dad. And I began praying, and he prayed, and we were both crying by the end of it. And it was beginning to really take. My son was really beginning to believe that God wanted to bless him. Now, that son is 40 now. And every time we leave each other, I'll give him a high five. You are such a great son. You are wonderful. And then he'll say, well, you're okay as a dad. Nah, you're great. And I'm just saying that blessing has power over time. My son believes he's blessed. He believes he's blessed. Let me tell you another story about a friend of mine. He's a huge black man who was a musician. And Young Life had 3,000 people down at Disney World from all over the world, and he was the musician leading this group of people because he's really good. And one night we had off, and people scattered out all over the place, and he went into a jazz club and listened to the music there. And he heard this young man who was really good on a saxophone and I can't remember one other instrument, and he listened to him. And then they went on a break, and my friend who went and sat down right at his table and said, can I sit down here? I said, I'm thinking, of course you can sit down there. You're huge. Who's going to try and push you away? But he said, the young guy said, sure, come on, sit down. And they began talking music, and my friend Henry said, you have an amazing gift from God. And they talked musically about the gift he had. And then as Henry, my friend, is getting to leave, in this jazz club, he said, could I put my hands on your head and ask God's blessing over you? Which he did. And I thought, that is what the church needs to be doing. We need to be going to places where people don't expect us. We don't have to have a little bottle of oil like I do. And you don't even have to do it loud. Sometimes when I'm in the cafeteria at the school, and you got to be careful about touching kids, I'll come up and I'll just barely touch them with my finger. And I'll be saying, Lord, bless my friend. Now I'll say their name. Give them life. I know they're going through it with their family, and it'll look like I'm talking to other people, but what I'm really doing is asking God's blessing on people. You don't have to be as out front as Henry is, but I think we're called as the people of God to bless people, not just in here, but in the world. I think that's part of what Jesus does. What Jesus does with his blessing is first, he takes it in, that 40 days in the wilderness. And he's out there thinking, what does it mean that I'm the beloved? Friends, it is hard to believe that we're the beloved. My parents had every message but that. And they were wonderful parents. But they were just more expectation, more and more and more and more. It wasn't, you are the beloved. Well, it's hard to take in that God has said over us, before every day, you're my beloved. That's where the gospel starts. When I talk about the beginning of the gospel, it begins with a blessing, because that's what God says over us. If you worked with me, I work at camps, mostly in Florida now, and I'll have 50 or 60 high school and college kids. I'll say, okay, we got a lot of work to do this week, but here's what we're going to do. Every day we get up at 7 o'clock. You're going to make us? Yes, we're going to get up at 7. We're going to meet so-and-so. And when they get there, I'll say, I want each of you to go under a tree, and I want you to imagine Jesus sitting right beside you and saying over you, you are blessed. I bless you. I love you. Just exactly what you had everybody say around here. And we can do that for a little while, but it takes a while to take it in. So I make them sit there for 5 or 10 minutes. In the first week, they think I'm crazy, but I'm in charge, so I can do whatever I want, So, but I'll say, you are blessed. Take it in. That's the hardest part, is taking it in. Now, part of our job after that, what does Jesus do after he takes it in? He passes it along. And story after story after story in the New Testament is Jesus passing that blessing along to people who need to be blessed. A leper, a woman who's been alone for 38 years because she's got a flow of blood. You just go through all those people who need Jesus' blessing, and he's here for them. That's what we do. That's what we're called to do, is take it in, pass it along. Now, what's hard for me is, for 40 years, I've worked in I've worked in two ways. I've worked here as an administrator, but where I work with kids, I worked with very, very poor kids. And they don't believe they've been blessed. And it's really hard for them to take in they've been blessed. I work with a wonderful guy that we teach youth ministry together, and he's got 6 children. And the last 2, he got because their mother was a cocaine addict. And they were foster kids at first, and then the mother did not show up at all for any of the 3 meetings with the judge, and so they're on their way to having those kids. Now, in one place, those kids would never believe they were going to be blessed. With Justin and Bethany, they will have a house and brothers and sisters where their blessing will be incredible. That's another thing we do. We figure out who needs to be blessed and how are we going to bless them. The guys I worked with, I've had a lot of guys I worked with killed. A lot of different ways. They couldn't take in that they were blessed, mostly. But to sit with a bunch of pretty tough guys, watching them begin to pray over each other and care for each other. And I wasn't using the term, the language blessing then, but that's exactly what they were doing with each other. And you say, their lives are going to be different. I'm thinking of one of them right now who I never went to his house, not once, when his mom was sober. We coached basketball together. He's a good athlete, and he had scars all over him. He loves kids. He coaches basketball. He does stuff in a tough community because God has blessed him and called him to reach out. Well, that's what God does to us. Blesses us first, then says, how are you going to pass it along? So here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to be quiet for I don't know if you do this here, well, I'm sure you do. Just 1 minute, bow your heads and say, Lord, help me understand how I'm blessed. Lord, is there a place I'm supposed to pass it along? Right? Okay? Bow your heads, please.